The Fellowship of the Great Physician welcomes you to House Call. Our hosts today are doctors of chiropractic, Dr. Gerald Lala and Dr. Richard Jensen, who is also a board-certified acupuncturist, practice independently in North Oaks, Minnesota. Let's join our hosts for today's program that will assist you in your quest for optimum health and well-being.
Welcome to House Call. I'm Dr. Gerald Lala.
And I'm Dr. Richard Jensen.
Wonderful to have you with us on this dimension of House Call. As you can see on the screen, we're going to talk about aspartame, a chemical that is in a lot of foods, and sometimes it really causes some serious health issues. We're not against chemicals. We just want to make you more aware that some of the health issues that you or a loved one may be confronted by might be caused by additives in foods. And today, as I said, we're going to focus on aspartame. And my esteemed colleague, Dr. Richard Jensen, is going to lead us into the program. Dr. Jensen?
Thank you, Dr. Lala. Well, aspartame is actually a composite of two amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins, basically. And these two amino acids, aspartic acid and phenylalanine, are linked together by a methyl group. So if we go to that first slide that we have, we're talking about phenylalanine, and with the methyl groups, as these amino acids are broken apart, they leave the methyl group independent of itself. And a lot of times, methyl in the body is greatly regulated on its own, so that we have a lot of methylation that goes in the body. But when a methyl group is separated all on its own independently, then it has a problem where it can be converted into formaldehyde, which is a problem for the body, because that's something that's used in basically the embalming of the body afterwards, so that it doesn't rot. But it's not good with biological systems. Another thing is people who can have problems with the amino acid phenylalanine itself, with phenylketonureics. These are people who should not have diet pop, because it does contain aspartame and has a high amount of this particular amino acid, can have problems with metabolizing this, and it can have problems with going into the brain and causing havoc with the neurotransmitters and a lot of other things throughout the body. Dr. Lala, do you have any further thoughts?
Well, there are types of reactions to the ingestion of aspartame. There are three primary categories. The first one is acute toxicity. So some people have an acute toxic reaction. It's quite immediate when they ingest foods or liquids that have aspartame in them. Secondly is a chronic toxicity. Many people who have chronic reactions to aspartame. And then the third one is potential side effects. So acute toxicity occurs within 48 hours of ingestion. Chronic toxicity occurs within several days of ingestion. And potential toxic effects that are nearly impossible to recognize, the length of aspartame are quite common. Now, aspartame toxicity numbers, let's talk about some of the numbers that are related to it. The estimated 1.9 million people with recognized aspartame toxicity reactions ranging from serious to mild. Secondly, there is an estimated 7.6 million people with unrecognized reactions. Thirdly, the FDA has been involved with particularly NutraSweet. The FDA investigated in the 1970s, so this goes back quite some time, stated facts as they found. Still under investigation, though, in the 1980s, and even now, the number of reported cases dropped. But in 1995, only 11 cases were reported. Now, the FDA and NutraSweet, I'm going to give you a quote here. The manufacturer lied, and they didn't submit the real nature of their observations, because they'd done that it is more likely than a great number of these studies would have been rejected simply because of adequacy. But Cyril, the manufacturer, took great pains to camouflage these shortcomings of the study. As I say, filter and just present to the FDA what they wish. See, they presented and filtered exactly what they wanted the FDA to have, to know that they did have other terrible things. For instance, animals would develop tumors while under the study. While they would remove these tumors from the animals. So this is a quote here by Dr. Adrian Gross of the FDA. Now, Dr. Jensen is going to discuss some commonly misdiagnosed hypersensitivity reactions to methanol hypersensitivities. Dr. Jensen?
Thank you, Dr. Lala. Well, methanol hypersensitivities are a cause of many health problems, but the cause is often missed, leaving people ill and not knowing the cause of their health problems. Finding the cause. As we find the cause, there's a combined IgE and IgG4 food sensitivity test that determines nearly 200 common food sensitivities, of which this aspartame may be identified. Now, we're talking about that. Remember how we were talking about that there are different types of sensitivities. There's the acute toxicity, the chronic toxicity, and then those people who may not know that they have toxicity at all. These are some people that, I mean, because as you hear about some of these different things that people can have, symptoms that they can have from this, they can run a huge gambit. Seen people with depression from this, headaches, migraines. Well, we'll get into the list, but there is a number of these types of things that it would really be a good thing for you to look into sensitivities for aspartame for yourself. Now, with a list of some of these diagnoses, let's go to Dr. Lala.
Some of the effects upon our eyes and our ears that people have hypersensitivities to aspartame include decreased vision. In other words, visual problems after they drink a food or drink a liquid or eat a food that has aspartame in it. They have visual problems. Secondly, they often encounter ringing in their ears, which sometimes the doctor refers to as tinnitus. Thirdly, dizziness. They'll get lightheaded and dizzy, and we see this many often in the chiropractic clinic that we practice in that many times dizziness is related to problems, subluxations or malalignments or issues within the cervical spine or neck, and they'll come in for an adjustment when in fact it's not anything that's malaligned in their neck, but rather a chemical hypersensitivity reaction. Headaches is another issue very commonly seen in our chiropractic clinic, in that many people do have headaches that are related to biochemical issues such as hypersensitivities to certain foods or chemicals, including aspartame, as well as subluxations or malalignments of vertebrae in their neck. Confusion, sometimes referred to as cognitive dissonance. In other words, they're just confused in their thoughts, so they can't get their tongue working in the way that they want it to work. Memory problems, forgetfulness. Many times they'll say, well, you're just under stress or you're getting old, when in fact, I mean, they may be under stress and they may be getting old, but the fact is they also may be having a reaction to aspartame and other foods or chemicals that they're hypersensitive to. Drowsiness or tiredness. Many times fatigue sets in when in fact they're not really, the body isn't tired, it's that it is being suppressed because of a reaction or hypersensitivities to aspartame. And lastly, sleeplessness or insomnia. Many people who are hypersensitive to aspartame and other chemicals will in fact have insomnia or sleeplessness. They just can't get to sleep because this chemical or these chemicals are continuing to fire within their blood system, keeping their brain awake when in fact we want it to sleep. So what are some of the other effects of the ingestion of aspartame, Dr. Jensen?
Thank you, Dr. Lau. Well, that brings up another subject also. Those people who are drinking diet pop, though they have now choices where it has caffeine or doesn't have caffeine, and sometimes they'll drink it late at night but say, oh, it's okay, I'm not drinking, you know, the stuff I'm drinking doesn't have caffeine in it. Well, it could be the aspartame that's got you all wired as well. And one of the things that we find with neurotransmitters is a particular neurotransmitter that's sensitive to phenylalanine will actually raise the norepinephrine and epinephrine in the brain, which is basically adrenaline in the brain, which has you all wired up. Let's go to the next slide where we're looking at other toxic effects of ingestion of aspartame. One of which is paresthesia, which is numbing or tingling in the limbs. So if you're having those pins and needles or just less feeling in your hands and in your feet, that can also be due to the ingestion of aspartame. Convulsions, grand mal epileptic attacks can also be one of the effects of this. So if you having problems with epilepsy, it might be a good thing to look into your food sensitivities as well. Like we said, or Dr. Lala has said earlier, it doesn't have to be aspartame. It could be just other sensitivities. So it's really a thing that one should look into. Petit mal attacks and absences, which is like the grand mal seizures. Petit mals are much less. A lot of times people, you'll look at them and they'll just start staring off into space. Those kind of things where you may not see it as a seizure at all. It's more of a blanking out of things. And so petit mal seizures could also be occurring after ingestion of aspartame. Severe slurring of the speech. It's not that they're drunk, it's that they're working through the effects of some of these artificial sweeteners. Severe tremors may also be the case. Remember, this messes up some of your neurotransmitters, and whenever you work with the nerves, you can cause some tremors in some ways. Hyperactivity. We talked about this earlier with diet pop, where phenylalanine in the brain is not necessarily a good thing. I mean, you have to have some, but it's in balance. And that if you have an imbalance, if you have a problem with processing phenylalanine as an amino acid, which is a building block of aspartame, it can raise up the adrenaline levels in your brain to be a point that you're just you're sped up, you're on pure adrenaline within your brain. So hyperactivity, it's hard to slow down when you have that. Let's look at the next one. Restless leg syndrome. Again, it's a neurological effect. Atypical facial pain can also occur. We have a lot of nerves within our face, and the trigeminal nerve that's coming out. There's a condition called trigeminal neuralgia, and what that does is people have a lot of pain within the trigeminal nerve, and sometimes it can be so painful to the point that these people can actually be suicidal due to the pain and where it just cannot reset. So facial pain is another large effect. Let's go to the next one here. Psychological and psychiatric reactions to aspartame. As mentioned earlier, severe depression. Severe depression can be a cause of aspartame. If you're suffering from severe depression and you're drinking diet pop, it might be one of those things that you just get off the diet pop. You might help yourself from that. Extreme irritability. That speaks for itself again when we're talking about where the brain is on adrenaline, it's going to make you irritable. How about severe anxiety attacks? Again, we've hyped up the brain, and therefore severe anxiety, it's just it makes the trigger much less to put you into that mode. Marked personality changes. We all change as to how hyped up we are. Just look at the mild-mannered person who goes into a football game and they're in there with the crowd and everybody's cheering and things like that. They have different personalities, it seems, while we're in the stadiums. So marked personality changes can also be the effect from aspartame. Recent severe insomnia, as we talked about. People who are drinking diet pop late at night, even though it doesn't have caffeine, this thing can hype up your brain, and therefore you're having trouble falling asleep until the effects wear down. Severe aggravation of phobias. So we have a number of different phobias. There's fear of height, fear of open spaces, fear of being on television. There's some of those that can be aggravated by drinking diet pop. So, Dr. Lala.
I know that we see many patients who have attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity issues, and quite commonly when we run both fixed and cyclic food sensitivity tests on them through blood testing, we find aspartame hypersensitivity. And also in many of those people we find high levels of mercury and lead and arsenic when we do blood studies on them as well. And so what it tells us is that we're really destroyed for lack of knowledge. Not only knowledge about our bodies, but about the internal chemistry of our bodies. And unfortunately today in our society it's so drug oriented that very often we just say, well, take this drug for this, take this drug for that. And as potentially good as some drugs are, all drugs have potential adverse effects. And we need to be cognizant of them. If you're not in an emergency situation, you need to really look up what the total effects, both good and potentially negative, are of any medications that you're taking. And you'll say, well, it's not happening to me. I've been taking this drug, or I've been drinking diet pops or eating foods with chemicals in them, man-manipulated chemicals in them, and say it's not affecting me at all. Well, very often, the body being the most difficult organism to kill, in other words, it has the strongest survival instinct, what it will do is defend itself and make internal biochemical compensations. We're not aware of them until symptoms show up, and many times it takes months or years for those symptoms to show up. So in fact, a person may be having emotional problems, sleep disorders, attention deficit syndrome, autism, all kinds of emotional and physical problems, and not recognize that it is the diet pop that they're drinking or foods that they're eating that have been fortified with chemicals just to add sweetener to them to make them more sweet or more palatable to the taste buds, or to give them longer shelf life. So again, it goes back that if a person is having health problems, it's not that hard to go off of these chemicals and to go natural. It's just not that difficult to do that. But even better yet, if a person's had a long-standing health problem, they're far better off to have what Dr. Jensen was talking about here, their neurotransmitters evaluated. These brain chemicals. Now, what are neurotransmitters? They're basically hormones that are carried by these amino acids or proteins, and they act as the firing mechanisms between nerves. It's said very, very simply. And as he said, epinephrine is one, norepinephrine is one, serotonin is another. So there are many of these neurotransmitters in our bodies, and they are not firing correctly. They are not being synthesized or manufactured correctly because we're taking in chemicals like aspartame, which are affecting the manufacture of them by our bodies and their potential functioning. So it pays then to have a simple blood test to see if that person is hypersensitive to certain foods or certain chemicals like aspartame, and then to have these neurotransmitters checked. And if a bit of this sounds sophisticated and overly scientific, we don't mean it to be that way, but if you want additional information that we're talking about today on aspartame or on neurotransmitters or any other health issue, that's all you have to do is call us, and when they bring up our telephone number, as you see there, and we're happy to send that information without any charge to you. So now let's look then at some of the chest symptoms that can be related to aspartame toxicity. Palpitation of the heart or irregular heartbeat. Many times people will have these irregular heartbeats or palpitation or cardiac irregularity, and they'll put a monitor on them and they can't figure out what it is. They check their sinoauricular node and other aspects of their cardiovascular system, of their heart, and they say it's all normal, but still they have cardiac irregularity, changes in the rhythm of their heart. Very often when it's not an organic issue within the heart itself, it is due to some biochemical hypersensitivity such as aspartame or some food that they're taking. It may even, and many times we see this in our chemical analysis of people's blood, that we see that they're taking an imbalance of certain vitamins or minerals or homeopathic remedies or herbs. So shotgunning ourselves with vitamins or minerals or homeopathic remedies or herbs isn't necessarily the answer, because they too can cause problems within the body. Secondly, tachycardia. What is tachycardia? It's the opposite of bradycardia. Tachycardia is a racing heart. Bradycardia is a slow, an abnormally slow heart rate. So many times aspartame and other chemicals that we ingest into our bodies will cause cardiac irregularity and a slowdown in our heartbeat. Another common symptom is shortness of breath. The person just can't get the breath that they need to get. And many times that's diagnosed then as sleep apnea, that when they go to bed at night, their breathing becomes so altered, and what do? They hook them up to a machine rather than check to see if there are some chemical irregularities or chemical hypersensitivities within their blood that could be causing the shortness of breath. Another common symptom is chest pain or atypical chest pain, that they can't find anything wrong with the heart organically, but still there's pain. Another is hypertension or high blood pressure. Another is multiple sclerosis. Now, what are some of the gastrointestinal symptoms that could be possibly related to aspartame or other food sensitivities? One, nausea. Secondly, diarrhea. Thirdly, blood in the stools. Fourthly, abdominal pain. Fifthly, pain or swelling of joints, chronic neck and back problems, for example. And the last one is irritable bowel syndrome. Now, my esteemed colleague, Dr. Richard Jensen, is going to discuss some of the skin and related allergies to food sensitivities, particularly aspartame. Dr. Jensen, please.
Thank you, Dr. Lala. Well, severe itching without a rash can occur. Remember, we're talking about a heightening of the nervous system. And if you look at it, when you're sitting down wrong, say a lot of people will cross their legs or even sit on one of the feet and so forth, or sit cross-legged, and your legs will start to fall asleep, and when you extend it out, you start to have that pins and needles. It's a waking up of the nervous system after the blood flow had been cut off for a while. And so let's look at it about the same way. If your nervous system is being hyped up, it's going to be hypersensitive and therefore cause some severe itching in that regard. Next, we have severe lip and mouth reactions, where you may have some swelling in the lips or some problems in the mouth in that way. Urticaria, which is hives. You may have this allergic reaction. It's a histamine reaction due to an allergy. When you're sensitive to these things, you might have, remember, proteins cause allergic reactions. And aspartame is, for all purposes, a type of protein. So when you have an allergic reaction, it's an alert of the immune system. And alerting the immune system can cause a histamine reaction, which causes swelling and hives and those kind of things as well. The next part of this is an aggravation of respiratory allergies, such as asthma or bronchitis. When we're looking at an aggravation of respiratory allergies, many times, an allergy attacks the lungs and can create a release of all those defenses in the body. One of the defenses that we have is a release of mucus, which can build up in the lungs. And so you're when you're talking about bronchitis and they're listening to your lungs, it's a buildup of mucus that's formed in there to help fight off and move out bacterial infections in the lungs. I'm not saying that aspartame causes bacterial infections, but if your immune system is being compromised in this regard, it can also make it much easier for an opportunistic bacteria to take over as well. Or to build up, such as what we find within the flu here. It's a virus. The virus breaks down the immune system, and when it does that, a bacteria comes in and it's opportunistic, and that's where people start to have bronchitis and sometimes pneumonia as well. Dr. Lala, How about endocrine malfunctions or
Well, some of the endocrine malfunctions or metabolic malfunctions related to aspartame hypersensitivity, as well as other food sensitivities, are number one, diabetes. You say, well, diabetes is caused by the insufficient secretion of insulin from the pancreas. Very true. But many times, aspartame and other foods that that individual is hypersensitive to will aggravate the proper functioning of the pancreas and its secretion of insulin, predisposing the person to first hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. And if that stays like that for years, ultimately what happens is it becomes hyperglycemia or adult onset diabetes. Secondly, menstrual changes. Believe it or not, many females, many women who have dysmenorrhea or premenstrual cramping or problems during menopause have a hypersensitivity to aspartame and other chemicals that are fortified in foods. Thirdly, weight gain. Would you believe that a lot of people who have trouble maintaining normal weight, who gain weight excessively, will have, and part of those issues will be related to aspartame and other chemical and food hypersensitivities. Next, weight loss. How about anorexia or bulimia? Many people who lose weight and can't keep it on, or have a psychological or spiritual aspects to that anorexia or bulimia, will in fact have a hypersensitivity to chemicals that are within coffee, within diet pop, within chocolate. Are we with me now? That's right. Now, thirdly, thinning or loss of hair. Many people, both male and females, who have sudden hair loss or a gradual loss of hair are the result not of a genetic predisposition, but of a hypersensitivity to certain chemicals or fortifications within liquids or foods, and that includes aspartame. Hypoglycemia, of which I just mentioned, which is low blood sugar. Many times the aspartame and other chemicals that people are hypersensitive to will cause their pancreas to malfunction, and it will result in hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. Other toxic effects or possible toxic effects of aspartame include urinary frequency. Hey, many of these people that are getting up 6 or 7 times at night are coffee drinkers, or other chemicals, diet pop or regular pop, soda pops, and that chemicals in it are causing that urinary bladder to dump the urine prematurely or too early. The bladder can't hold on to it. Dysuria, that is burning on urination. Severe joint pains. A lot of the chronic back and joint problems we see as doctors of chiropractic are related to aspartame hypersensitivity and other food sensitivities. Things such as fibromyalgia, bloating, fluid retention, and increased susceptibility to infection, of which Dr. Jensen was just talking about. So, we are a human body, we are a spirit living in a body with a soul and emotions, and those things need to be looked at from the spiritual and psychological dimension as well. But we also are a biochemical entity, and we are affected by not only the foods we drink, or the foods we eat and the liquids we drink and the things that come in our environment, so it pays to look at your whole person. It really does. So we've enjoyed having you on House Call today. We welcome you on our next program. Be careful of what you take into this temple of the Lord, for it is the temple of the Lord.
The Fellowship of the Great Physician, through its School of Health and Healing, provides classes each Thursday evening. The primary focus of these classes is biblically based spiritual health and healing, with a brief teaching on physical health and healing. There is no charge or registration fee for these classes, but a free will offering is received. For further information on the School of Health and Healing, class time and location, or the topics discussed on today's program, contact us at the Fellowship of the Great Physician in care of Dr. Lala or Dr. Jensen at 200 Village Center Drive, Suite 100, North Oaks, Minnesota, 55127, or telephone us at 651-484-8521. Thank you for joining us today.